Hi, my name is Tiffany Zhang, and I'm the founder and host of Empathy Gaps, an online YouTube video podcast. Welcome to episode 9. Using technology in school is part of our everyday lives now, from elementary school all the way up to postgraduate education. But what are some of the changes this technology has had on our learning, and what are some positive and negative effects we should be aware of when using technology and media in elementary schools with young children? In this episode, Dr. Preston and I will discuss changes in students' learning due to technology, how to maximize digital wellness for children, and how to safely use technology in the classroom. Here is my conversation with him. Hi everyone, and welcome to Empathy Gaps, an online video podcast focused on creating a safe space to discuss mental health and psychology, while also working to address the needs of the current mental health crisis. I'm Tiffany Zhang, your host, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Michael Preston. He serves as the Executive Director at the Joan Ganz Cooney Center at Sesame Workshop, an independent research lab that, quote, advances positive futures for kids in the digital world. And he's also the co-founder of CSForAll, an organization that seeks to make computer science education an important part for K-12 students in NYC public schools. Dr. Preston, thank you so much for being here today and taking the time to join me. Before we start, is there anything else that you want to add regarding to what you do and who you are?
Sure. Thank you, Tiffany. It's really an honor to be here. So maybe I should say a few words about the center. So we're named after Joan Ganz Cooney, who started Sesame Street in the 1960s. And she's remains on our board of directors, which is an enormous privilege. We're really lucky to have her input on all the work we do. We're a nonprofit inside Sesame Workshop, which is the nonprofit that makes Sesame Street, of course. And the way I think about our work, as a center name for her, is to continue to ask the sort of original question that created the Sesame Street we know today, which is how do you leverage today's emerging media to benefit kids? And so that we apply that across everything we do. I thought it would be just helpful to provide some context about why we're named the way we're named and the context in which we operate. I can say more about that depending on what kind of questions you ask.
Yeah, of course. So going to my first question, what sparked your interest in technology and helping children learn?
Oh, wow. That goes way back. So I grew up in a house where we always had a computer, which in my era was a unique thing. My dad worked at Bell Labs, and we had a computer that you had to hook up to a telephone and dial into a server. And the only thing you could really do on it was play games that you could type the commands to. There wasn't a lot of graphical interface or anything like that. So from an early day, had access to this and loved trying to program little things and play games that were kind of rudimentary compared to what's happening now. But it really sparked my interest in technology early. And then over the years, I guess I loved being a student. I love to learn. I still love to learn. And so when I graduated from college, I saw the intersection of these two things, computers and learning, as something I wanted to try and figure out how to do. Coincidentally, the internet kind of arrived in schools around that time, which I'm sure feels like prehistoric to you. But when that happened, it was a big deal. Schools suddenly had access to everything we know online, although in the late 90s, that was pretty rudimentary as well compared to what everybody has today. But it was what I saw it as was this unique opportunity to bring a new way of thinking about learning into classrooms rather than just sort of a shiny new object in the classroom or a threat to the way we know our work, but actually an opportunity to center kids. And so basically connecting my own initial excitement and interest in learning with technology to something that could maybe extend to more kids timed well with what was happening in schools.
Mm-hmm. And I know you talked about technology kind of either being a shiny new thing or like the thing that kind of like destroys people, I guess. Like, how does media help children learn, and also how does it harm children's learning?
That's a tough one. Well, I'll start with the positives. I think kids obviously, and people generally of all ages, gravitate toward things that are, stimulating. They grab your attention. They're exciting and interesting. They open up new worlds, new possibilities. And so, the same way television felt that way early on, if you think about how limited TV was, one way broadcast, you have to tune in at a moment and see what you see, versus now being um, not you don't even talk about channels really anymore. It's just like everybody's a channel. Everybody can make content and share it. Everybody can respond, share, interact with it. It's a totally different ball game, but I think it's endlessly fascinating to experience. More and more personalized, more and more opportunity to just dive into something you really care about, or get broadly exposed to lots of new things. I think that that's always going to be of interest to kids, irrespective of the platform. So certain things are kind of immutable, like child development, how kids grow from an early age to teenage years and beyond, and interest in new things that draw your attention, offer new possibilities. So there's a lot of potential there to harness that for learning. And per my previous comment too, the role of technology in schools, as much as it is a learning aid in all the ways that we think about it, I think it's also a game changer for getting people to the table to think differently about learning or about kids and what's possible. And we can talk more about that. But I think um, if you can get people to think differently about their everyday practice, break cycles or sort of rote patterns people get in, I think that's a really good tool. And so there have been moments in my career where that's been possible. Um, on the negative side, I mean, technology isn't always well designed. It can be really boring. I mean, I have kids who my own kids at home who routinely just complain about how mundane what they are learning in school is, or yet another day in Google Classroom or whatever. Not to malign Google Classroom, which is amazing in other ways, but like the content has to be good, the engagement has to be good. We know a lot about interactivity and we know a lot about learning. It's not always followed by technology designers and developers, especially if it's just like just a big learning platform. So there's always room to do better. I think, and then I think, and you're alluding maybe to the overall public discussion of the harms of media. I mean, there's no shortage of things that are terrible that happen in online spaces. There was a news story over the weekend about one of the big platforms and like the rise of kid influencers and how their parents, use them. I don't know if you saw that article. I think it was in the Times, but it was a little bit nerve-wracking to read that. But those are also human behaviors that go with technology. So technology is a design, a set of affordances, and then behaviors adapt to them or change as a result of what's possible online. And so it's an interesting balance between those two things.
Yeah, definitely. I remember when I was younger, like the way I learned best was personally through media and online games. So like as you said, like making sure the media is engaging, but I've also had my fair share of like learning with media that wasn't engaging. So I think definitely the design of certain games and technology is important. And yeah, definitely, as you said, with like certain media, it is hard. Like, media does sometimes encourage like bad habits, bad behaviors, but I really like the work that your center is doing and trying to like maximize the good benefits of media.
Oh, thanks.
And
Are there particular games or experiences you remember from your early years that were that you kind of go back to as positive for you?
I think there's this game called Some Dog. It's like a math game, and like if you get a question right, you can like get points and like bonuses and stuff. And I remember I really liked that game. And I mean, my next question would be like, have you seen any changes in the way kids learn in the past years? And I guess like how has like technology kind of adapted to that? Like, do you think kids are becoming less distracted with learning or more distracted with learning? Like, I would like to know kind of the changes in the way have kids have learned
Mhm.
with technology.
Oh yeah, there's so many ways we could go with this. Let me maybe two that come to mind right off the bat. I mean, the one big one, obviously, in the digital space is personalization. People are obsessed over years of research that shows one-to-one tutoring obviously has the largest effect size for gains in various kinds of learning, and so that's always been the sort of prize, right? People are trying to create really strong systems that can adapt to kids' needs, learn about their habits, their what they know and what they don't know, and kind of keep them in the zone of proximal development, as it were. Have you heard of that phrase before, the zone of proximal development?
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
Okay. Right. I'm sure you've come across it, maybe even in some of these interviews, but that's a term, a psychology term from Vygotsky, who you will soon read about if you haven't already. But basically, it just means it's the space that is just a little bit beyond where a student is right now. So you're always trying to keep them in the space of growing into that new space where which is just right for them. Um, so proximal meaning proximate, like close to you, and so that the student is challenged but not too much. So these systems, intelligent systems. I mean, we've been talking about intelligent tutoring systems in human computer interaction for a long time, and with systems like Khan Academy, for example, going from videos that you kind of go through at your own pace at a sequence to like Conmigo, which is Gen AI driven and can actually know a bit more about you and then match it with a much bigger data set that it's trained on. We're starting to see like another kind of shift in what's possible for that. So like personalization in a really meaningful way for learning is getting better and better. So that's exciting. The other I think about is how students themselves, because they have such powerful tools that were unavailable to them a decade or more ago, radically different, right? Every student can make digital media products as learning objects for each other, for an educator, for their peers, for the public, and it's so much easier and better than it was. Like I think it's we almost have to um, challenge ourselves to think of new ways to harness that in ways that make sense and actually meet learning goals. But I think that's really exciting. I don't need to go maybe into all the details. You can probably imagine you probably do this for school right now or for your own fun, but like you can make a very professional looking production about something you care about for a public audience. That's just amazing to me.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Going back to what you said about personalization, I know with the rise of AI or rise of AI in Quizlet, I guess, and like other platforms, it does like kind of like those platforms do like target what you need to learn, what you need to remember specifically, and it kind of adjusts to like how you specifically are learning, which I think is really nice and definitely a big step in the like digital learning space. And I know part of your center's mission statement is to like conduct research on emerging technologies and put this research into action to support children's learning and well-being. What are some things that like your center has done to like kind of support children's learning, especially well-being?
So we're in the middle of some new work that's still formative. Part of what I love about being at that edge of what's currently available, currently happening, and what's possible is that we're in our own sort of zone of proximal development, maybe using that phrase again, but this idea that well-being, for example, is something that an everyday person can name what it means to them. There's a lot of value in taking that seriously and trying to codify it or translate it into something that could be set up as a target for designers. One of the projects that we're currently involved in, we're actually working on several projects in the well-being space, but I'll name a couple of them. One is the Right Tech project with Lego and UNICEF, which is a research-based framework where global interviews and sort of reanalysis of global data sets landed us with the team there on a definition of like a framework for understanding well-being that was derived from the voices of kids who explained to the researchers what their vision of well-being was in digital play. And so driving with that, using that as the sort of starting point for conversations with researchers and designers and developers to say, what would this look like if you were to take it into the studio where you're making new digital play experiences for kids or learning experiences for kids. So things like um, identity and competency and self-regulation, safety, obviously, and other things like that show up in ways that can be identified, make sense to kids and adults, and from there, how would you know you're successful, and what kinds of features and games would allow you to get there? And sometimes those features are in dialogue with each other, which I think is really interesting. Like um, you've played games before, so you know sometimes you get really frustrated and it's hard, and you might need to walk away from the game because you're just not working, or you're upset if it's a really intense game, and so you're using your self-regulation to decide when it's time to stop. And then you come back and you start again, and eventually you succeed. And that's a form of competence, right? You're growing skill. So in a game situation, it's easy to kind of come up with that, but also it's the same experience that can happen in a learning environment, right? You always want to be, again, I keep going back to this example of like the sort of proximal goals, like just a little bit beyond your current ability. So you want to have a learner stay in a space of productive struggle. So they're like, you're getting there in math or a foreign language or something like that, and that this a system could keep you there, and then eventually you get competence and you have a positive feeling from it. So those kinds of things, like how do we help designers create those experiences and know how to measure and how to calibrate their systems for that outcome? So that's kind of how we're thinking about it right now. I mentioned another project. It's called Digital Thriving. We're working with the video game industry, designers from multiple companies who are interested in this as a product as well. So I think games and play are kind of a natural place to start from because those are places that people want to be. But there are also lots of great crossover opportunities. So ed tech is really, optimally speaking, it's something that you go to because it feels you're meeting your own kind of growth goals, but you're enjoying it as well. So I think there's lots of lessons that can be shared between the two.
Yeah, and with games, I know I interviewed someone else. Her name is Anastasia Goodstein. I don't know if you know her, but she was talking about how she also like went into the game space to run mental health campaigns because that's like an optimal space, which I thought was interesting. And because I feel like game spaces for mental health campaigns isn't exactly the first place you'd think of to run a mental health campaign. But I mean, she talked about how like it ended up working and stuff. And I don't know if you like remember the specific publication that the center did, but I think it's called Responsible Innovation in Technology for Children Framework. And my question kind of arose from that because that was like a project that I was really interested in, like what y'all did and stuff. So.
Oh, sure. You want me to talk about that a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so the publication you saw might be, well, there's one called that we recently did called Understanding Wellbeing in Digital Spaces that's derived from that work. It was just published maybe a month or two ago, and the lead author on that was a guy named Daniel Alonso, who's a doctoral student in New York City at Fordham, and he was working with us for about a year, and it took the lead on creating this publication, which basically took the RightTech framework that I just mentioned, and did a sort of expansion of each of the framework items to connect it to current literature, which is helpful for a researcher too, obviously, but also to translate it, go a little bit further toward what someone taking up those ideas in their work might need, just to give it some context and color that would be helpful. And that's kind of the work we do at the Cooney Center. We are a small organization in the middle of research and academia on the one side, and industry and design and development of products on the other, as well as we have connections to like policy and people who do work in classrooms and libraries and that kind of stuff. So we kind of try to situate ourselves in the middle and be connective. And so that kind of translation work for research, where there's a lot of really robust work that went into the RightTech foundational framework, how do we make more people aware of and interested in that work and see it as something that speaks to them in their own work, wherever that might be. So that might be a place I would direct people who hear your podcast. Look for that.
Mhm. And I know we just talked about what the Cooney Center does to support children's like digital wellness and stuff. What are some things that like ordinary people can do to support like children's digital wellness?
Hmm. By ordinary people, I'm going to include parents and other family members who have kids in their lives. And I would say one of the best things you can do is really try to understand it from a personal perspective. You mentioned, it's in the media all the time. We talked about how um, folks have this sort of there's a recurring narrative of the negative impacts, the harms. The Surgeon General's report on loneliness. There's a lot of really important work out there. I think there's also somewhat a negative drumbeat that is almost self-reinforcing about how media can be bad. It's true. My belief is it's a much more nuanced conversation than just blaming technology, but it's certainly one that's out there. I would say if you're in the lives of kids and where media is concerned, to really get to know it and experience it with kids. Take the time to play games with them, have them show you what their online life looks like, if it's in social media or some other space, and really get to understand it and know it. You even try it yourself separately so that you're actually versed in the dynamics of it and what kids are actually doing and the affordance of different things they're doing. And like maybe try to enjoy it. Um, Tie it back to the Sesame and Joan Ganz Cooney origin story. The whole premise of Sesame Street was co-viewing, that adults and kids would watch the show together, which is why Sesame to this day, season 54 is on the air right now. So 54 years of TV designed for adults to watch with kids, adult caregivers of all kinds, parents, grandparents, neighbors, wherever kids are spending their time, can watch it, appreciate it, enjoy the special guest stars who are more famous for the adults than for the kids, and then have some kind of interaction around it. So when it's done, you can go off and do other things, but still talk about it or take some lessons from it. So I think in a digital world where that's less likely to happen because everybody's on their own little personal screen, to actually not just use that as a handoff opportunity, but to actually take an active interest and share in it as much as possible, and the age with the kids and really like continue to be interested in that experience together.
Mhm. I also think as a parent, like teaching your kid sufficient media literacy skills is also important since media literacy skills can act as a shield from the harmful effects that social media may have on developing teens. Like for example, just like being able to discern what is fake and what is not can help people feel like less overstimulated and calmer when surfing the web. And then
That's a great point. Yeah, sorry, did you have another question? Yeah.
Yes. And then I also wanted to touch back on the classroom setting that we were talking about earlier. So I know that you're an advisor for the wellness classroom. And as an advisor, like what programs do you think seem to work for school ecosystems and which ones don't? And like for context for anyone that doesn't know, the Wellness Classroom is an organization that tests mental health programs for students in New York schools to find like with patch and with which path and approach schools should take when dealing with their students' mental health.
Great. So I would say, so the wellness classroom, thanks for asking that. I wasn't expecting you to go so deep on the things I'm involved in. That's really cool. So the wellness classroom is actually brand new. It's maybe a year old now, and it's a foundation. So they basically um, exist to raise dollars to then seed fund innovative ideas that can help expand mental health support in New York City public schools. So if you go to the website, you can see there's already a slate of grantees, and you can see across the different grantees that they're basically it's different approaches to expanding access fundamentally. The New York City school system is something like 1,700 schools for more than 1 million students, and so just the capacity to serve that many kids in a post-pandemic environment when school budgets are being cut due to all the effects of cutbacks and so forth. So how we can kind of think about that differently, whether it's offering training to more people within a building or offering more support from outside. Could we mobilize more graduate students of social work into schools, or are there online services that can be deployed to kids and adults in a building so that it all just helps kind of build capacity, build scale, and give more people the tools they need to like understand social emotional learning, or provide like more awareness and intervention opportunities for kids who are really struggling. So that's the premise of it. That's good. Good. Thank you for asking about that.
Yeah, and that was kind of the last question I had. So thank you so much, Dr. Preston, for coming on and speaking with me. It was amazing. And I guess like any closing remarks that you still want to say?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you and admire the work you're doing here. I guess again, I think that you try to have the experiences yourself. There's a lot of media out there that's telling you about the media, and it's worth verifying. Like to your point of understanding what's true and what's not true. AI obviously accelerating the pace at which different narratives can appear for everybody. I think you have trust but verify is even just verify period is more and more the case. And I think the more you can derive your understanding from personal exploration, the better off you'll be, and really for adults and for kids. So
Yeah, totally.
that's my guidance. Yeah.
And yeah, that was really great. Thank you so much, Dr. Preston, once again, and I will see everyone next time. Bye.